No Sleep Story by Matt Query. Vado Cabron. Part 1. The Land Chapter 1. The purchase. My wife Claire and I bought the property in the spring of the year I turned 36, which was 2 years after I came home from overseas, and 1 year after we had decided, quietly and by mutual agreement, that the city was slowly doing something to both of us that we did not want done. The decision to leave was not dramatic. It did not arrive in a single moment of revelation. It accumulated over months in the way that the right decisions often accumulate, through the specific gravity of enough small things pointing in the same direction. The property was called the Harlan Place by the county records, after the family that had last owned it. 63 acres of mixed mountain terrain in central Idaho. A long valley running north to south with creek frontage along the eastern boundary, and timbered slopes rising on both sides, and a main house that had been built in the 1940s and added to twice since, most recently in the 1980s. And that was solid in the bones and thoroughly imperfect in every cosmetic detail, and that we loved immediately and without reservation. We made the offer on a Tuesday, and it was accepted by Thursday, and we were in the truck with the dog on Saturday. That was how it happened. That was the speed of it. Some decisions are like that, I have found. The ones that are right arrive and you recognize them, and you move before the recognition can be second-guessed into paralysis. The dog was named Rook. He was 3 years old, black and white, a border collie with the working intelligence of the breed and the particular energy of a dog who has been waiting his entire life for a place worth running in. When I opened the truck door at the property and he went out across the valley grass toward the creek, I thought, I was right. I was right to come here. I still believe I was right, even after everything that followed. I want to be clear about that from the beginning. The valley was the right place and the property was the right property, and coming here was the right decision. What was in the valley was already in the valley when we arrived. We did not bring it. We did not make it. We simply moved into its territory, and learning the rules of its territory was the work of our first year. I wish someone had told us the rules before the first night. Chapter 2. The nearest neighbors were a couple named Bill and Darla Prout, who had a property 3 miles north of ours along the same valley floor, accessible by the same dirt road that came off the county highway. Bill was 64, a retired civil engineer who had spent 30 years building roads in the Mountain West, and who had bought the Prout property the year he retired, and who had the particular physical quality of a man who has spent his working life outdoors and whose body has been shaped by that. Darla was 60, a nurse practitioner who still drove into town 3 days a week to work at the clinic there, and who had the particular steadiness of someone who has spent her career in rooms where steadiness mattered. They came on our third evening. We heard the truck before we saw it, the sound of it on the dirt road carrying a long way in the mountain air, and Rook posted himself at the gate and watched it arrive with the focused interest of a dog for whom vehicular arrivals were a new development. Bill and Darla got out with a casserole and a bottle of locally produced wine and the particular easy directness of people who have not needed to perform friendliness for a long time and can offer the real thing without effort. We sat on the porch in the early evening and ate the casserole, which was very good, and drank the wine, which was adequate, and talked about the property and the valley and the town and the particular conditions of life at this altitude and this latitude that were different from anything Claire and I had experienced before. Darla told us about the winters. Bill told us about the creek's behavior in the spring thaw. They both told us things we needed to know about the road and the county services, and the particular local politics of water rights that were a feature of every piece of mountain land I would ever encounter. Then, Bill put his glass down. He looked at Darla, which was a specific kind of look, the look of two people checking with each other about something they have previously agreed to, but that still requires a moment of mutual confirmation before saying. She gave a small nod. Bill looked at me. He said, "There is something about this valley we need to tell you. It is going to sound unusual. I am going to ask you to hear all of it before you respond, and I am going to ask you to take it seriously." I said, "All right." He told us. Chapter 3. What Bill told us, he told us in the direct and sequential way of a man who has decided the best approach to an unusual subject is the same approach that works for usual subjects, which is to put the facts down in order and let them speak. He said, "There is something in this valley. It has been in this valley longer than any structure on it, longer than any family that has had its name on the county records. We do not know what it is in any complete sense. The families that were here before white settlement had a name for it in their language that translates, approximately, as the old patience of the land. Their relationship with it was different from ours. We do not fully understand their relationship with it. What we understand is what we have observed in 31 years of living 3 miles north of you." He said, "It comes to the houses in this valley at the turning of each season. Spring equinox, summer solstice, fall equinox, winter solstice. Every year without exception. Every house in the valley. It comes once at each turning and it does what it does and it leaves." I said, "What does it do?" Bill said, "At each turning it comes differently. The form it takes changes with the season. What it does changes with the form. What it wants from you changes too, or at least what it seems to want. We have learned over 31 years the shape of each visit and what is required of you during it. If you do what is required, the visit ends and it leaves. If you do not, the consequences are significant." I said, "What kind of consequences?" Darla said, "The kind that cannot be undone." She said it simply and without drama, and the simplicity of it was more compelling than any drama would have been. Bill said, "We have written down what we know. The rules for each season, what to expect, what to do and what not to do. We will give you the document tonight. We want you to read it carefully and to take it seriously. Not because we expect you to believe us immediately. Because the first visit is spring and the equinox is in 3 weeks, and 3 weeks is not very much time." He looked at me steadily. He said, "3 weeks from tonight it will come." I sat on the porch of my new home in the early Idaho evening with the wine in my hand, and the casserole in my stomach and the dog at my feet, and I looked at Bill Prout across the porch table, and I thought, this man is serious. Bill Prout was the most serious person I had ever met. I had met a great many serious people in my professional life, people who took the gravity of situations for what it was and operated accordingly without flinching. Bill Prout's seriousness was of that category. I said, "Tell me the rules." Part 2, Spring Chapter 4. What Bill's document said about spring, the document was handwritten. 22 pages in Bill's precise engineer's script, organized by season with subsections covering what to expect, what was required, what was prohibited, and what had happened on occasions when the prohibitions were violated. The section on spring was the longest. I read it twice that night and once more in the morning, and I read it to Claire on the second morning because she had been reading her own sections, but I wanted her to hear the spring section in my voice so we could talk about it together, which was how we handled things that were serious. The document said, in spring, it comes as a light. A single point of light, yellowish white, approximately the intensity of a candle flame, visible through any window facing the eastern slope. It will appear at dusk on the equinox and remain visible until approximately 2 hours before sunrise. During this time, it will not approach the house. It will remain at a fixed distance of approximately 300 yards from the nearest exterior wall. The document said, the rules for spring are these. Do not go outside after the light appears. Do not attempt to approach the light. Do not extinguish any lights inside the house. Do not cover any windows facing the eastern slope. If you have animals that require outdoor care after dusk on the equinox, perform that care before dusk, or it will not be performed that night. The light does not enter structures. Remaining inside the house is sufficient. The document said on one occasion, 31 years ago, a previous occupant of the Harlan place went out toward the light. This was before we understood the rules fully. The person who went out was not killed. They returned to the house before sunrise. They were not able to describe what they had experienced in any way that communicated meaning. They left the valley within a week and were not seen again. The document said, "We do not know what the light is in any physical or spiritual sense. We know what it does, which is to watch. In spring, it watches. As long as you do not go to it, the watching is all it does." I finished reading this section aloud to Claire. She was quiet for a moment. She said, "We moved to a property with a watching light." I said, "Yes." She said, "Bill Prout wrote 22 pages about it." I said, "Yes." She said, "He seemed completely sincere." I said, "Yes." She was quiet again. She said, 3 weeks. I said, 3 weeks. We sat in the kitchen of the house that was ours now, with the valley visible through the windows and the eastern slope green and solid in the spring morning. And we looked at each other in the way of two people who have moved 3 states away from everything familiar, and discovered that what they moved into contained something that the real estate documents did not disclose. Claire said, "We should make sure Rook is inside before dusk." I said, "Yes." She said, "And we should probably not cover the windows." I said, "No." She picked up her coffee. She said, "All right then." Chapter 5. The spring equinox. I want to be honest about my state of mind on the spring equinox, which was that I was 2 parts curious and 1 part skeptical, and some smaller fraction of something that was not quite fear, but that was in the same neighborhood. I am a practical man. I spent 7 years in the Army, and I have been in situations of genuine danger, and I know what it costs to be afraid, and I know that fear is a resource to be managed rather than an emotion to be indulged. I had read Bill's document, and I had taken it seriously in the sense that a practical man takes unusual claims seriously, which is to gather the information and operate according to it, without requiring full belief as a precondition for taking precautions. So I made sure Rook was inside 2 hours before dusk. I confirmed that every interior light was on. I checked that no curtain covered any window on the eastern side. I looked at Claire and she looked at me, and we were as prepared as 2 people who had lived on this property for 3 weeks could be. We sat in the living room and watched the eastern slope go gold, and then orange, and then the particular deep blue of mountain dusk. And at the moment when full dark was just beginning to establish itself, the light appeared. It was exactly where Bill's document had said it would be, approximately 300 yards out, on the flat of the valley floor between the house and the base of the eastern slope. A single point of yellowish-white light, the intensity of a candle, completely still. I stood at the window and looked at it. It was not remarkable in any visual sense. A light in the dark at 300 yards is a mundane thing. A flashlight, a lantern, a person with a headlamp. None of these explanations were satisfying given the context, but the light itself, stripped of context, was entirely ordinary. What was not ordinary was the quality of attention that came with it. I have been looked at many times in my life in many contexts, and most of the time being looked at is a social transaction, the exchange of visual attention between 2 people, unremarkable in its frequency. But there are moments when being looked at is qualitatively different from this, when the attention coming toward you from another source has a weight to it, a mass, something you feel in the skin and the back of the neck before you have processed it consciously. standing at the window of my house on the spring equinox, looking at a small and ordinary-looking light in my valley 300 yards away, I felt the full weight of that attention. Something was looking at me, not with hostility, not with any of the emotional qualities I would have attributed to human attention, with the patient and complete attention of something that was very old and very interested, and that was not in any hurry because it had never been in a hurry. Claire was beside me. She put her hand in mine. She said, "I feel it." I said, "Yes." We stood at the window and looked at the light, and the light looked at us, and we did exactly what Bill's document told us to do, which was to stay inside and keep the lights on and wait. At 4 in the morning, approximately 2 hours before sunrise, the light went out. The valley was dark and empty, and the eastern slope was the eastern slope, and we were still standing at the window, which we had not left for the 9 hours of the equinox night. Rook had come to sit between us sometime around midnight, and the three of us had been there together, which was the right way to spend the night. I was certain of that then and remained certain of it now. I said, "It is gone." Claire said, "Yes." We went to bed. We slept until noon. When we woke, the valley was the valley we had fallen in love with, and the eastern slope was green and solid in the spring sunshine, and Rook was at the door wanting breakfast, and everything was ordinary. I called Bill. I said we had the spring visit. He said, "How was it?" I said we stayed inside. We kept the lights on. He said, "Good." I said, "Bill?" He said, "Yes." I said it was real. He said, "Yes, it always is." Part 3, Summer Chapter 6. What Bill's document said about summer was different. The document was clear about this. Every season was different. The spring visit was characterized by watching. The summer visit was characterized by something that the document described as testing. The document said, in summer, it comes as a figure. The figure is approximately human in proportion and shape, but the document is precise about this, approximately. It walks upright. It has the correct number of limbs for a person. It moves with the gait of something that has studied human movement and replicated it without fully understanding what drives it. The document said, the summer visit begins at sunset on the solstice. The figure appears at the tree line on the northern slope and walks slowly toward the house. It does not rush. Its pace is approximately a walking pace. At this pace, it takes the figure approximately 40 minutes to cover the distance from the tree line to the house. The document said, the figure will not enter the house as long as the front door is locked. It will try the front door. It will try the rear door. It will walk the perimeter of the house once in each direction. It will stop at each window. At each window, it will stand and look inside for a period of approximately 2 to 4 minutes before moving on. During this time, you will be able to see it at the windows. It will be able to see you. The document said, the rules for summer are these. Lock the front door before sunset. Lock the rear door before sunset. Lock every interior door as well, for reasons we will explain. Close every window before sunset, but do not cover them. Keep a light on in every room. If the figure is at a window of the room you are in, do not look directly at its face. This is the most important rule for summer. Do not look at its face. The document said, on the occasion when we looked at its face, we were not harmed physically. But what we saw at the window was not what we had expected to see, and what we saw at the window has not left us in the years since that night. We do not describe what we saw in this document, because we do not believe that a description of it would serve any useful purpose, and might cause harm that direct experience would not cause. Trust us on this. I read this section to Claire. She said, do not look at its face. I said, those are the words. She said, Bill and Darla looked at its face. I said, once. 31 years ago, she said, and they have not forgotten it. I said, that is what the document says. She thought about this. She said, why does it lock every interior door? I said the document says that on the second occasion they did not lock the interior doors. The figure opened the front door even though it was locked. It was inside the house for approximately 7 minutes before it left. During those 7 minutes, the locked interior doors held. Claire was quiet for a moment. She said, "It got through the front door." I said, "On one occasion in 31 years." She said, "But the interior doors held." I said, "Yes." She said, "All right." Chapter 7. The summer solstice. I had the front and rear doors locked 2 hours before sunset. I had every interior door locked. I had a light on in every room. I had Rook with me in the living room, which I had decided was where Claire and I would spend the night, because the living room had the best visibility of the approaches to the house and the fewest windows at which the figure could position itself close to us. Rook knew something was coming. He had known all day. Dogs read their environment with instruments we do not have, and he had been reading his environment since morning with the focused and alert attention of a dog, whose instruments are telling him something important. He was not frantic. He was attentive in the specific way of a working dog that has been given a job and is doing it. The figure appeared at the northern tree line at sunset. It was visible from the living room window, a dark shape at the edge of the trees, and the first thing I registered about it was the proportions. The document had said approximately human, and the approximately was doing significant work in that sentence. It was the right height for a person. The limbs were the right number and the right general shape. The movement was the right general category of movement, upright and bilateral. But the proportions within those parameters were not right. The arms were too long. Not dramatically, not in the exaggerated way of a caricature, but by the specific amount that was visible as wrong without being immediately identifiable as wrong. The amount that registers in the visual system as an error before the conscious mind has located the specific error. The neck was slightly too long. The torso was slightly too narrow. The legs moved correctly, but the weight distribution during the movement was off in a way that was hard to articulate precisely, but that you felt as wrong in the way a false note feels wrong before you have named it. It walked toward the house. Rook put himself between the window and Claire and stood there, which was not a thing I had trained him to do and was a thing I noted. The figure covered the distance in the 40 minutes the document had estimated. It moved without deviation, without rushing, without any hesitation in the approach. It walked across the valley floor in the moonlit dark with the specific purposefulness of something that has done this before and knows exactly where it is going. It tried the front door. I heard the handle. I had been listening for it. The handle turned the full range of its travel in the unlocked direction, held for a moment, and then returned to its resting position. The figure moved to the rear door and tried that handle too. Then it began the perimeter walk. The first window it stopped at was the kitchen window on the east side. I was not in the kitchen. The kitchen light was on, as all the lights were on, and the kitchen was visible through the window in its full and ordinary extent. From where I was in the living room, I could not see the window directly, but I could see the light from the kitchen change in a subtle way when the figure was at the window, the light altering slightly the way it alters when a large object is positioned close to the glass outside. It moved to the next window, the bathroom, then the small utility room at the back, then around to the south side of the house, which had 2 bedroom windows and the study window. Then it came to the living room window. It stopped. I had positioned Claire with her back to the window and myself facing it, but at an angle, so that I could see the window in my peripheral vision without looking at it directly. This was my strategy for the face rule. Do not look at its face means do not look at it directly. Peripheral vision does not require looking. In my peripheral vision, the figure was at the window. It was standing close to the glass. I could see the general shape of it, the proportions that were almost right, the posture that was almost the posture of a person looking through a window into a lit room. I did not look at its face. I looked at Claire, who was looking at me, whose eyes were steady and whose jaw was set in the way of someone who is managing something and doing it well. Rook was between us and the window. The figure stayed at the window for 4 minutes. I know this because I was counting, in the way I had learned to count time in situations where a watch was not available and the duration of things mattered. 4 minutes of something standing at my window in the dark, something I could not look at directly, something that I knew from 31 years of documented experience I should not look at directly. Then it moved. It continued around the north side of the house, completing the perimeter. We heard it try the front door again when it came back around, then the rear door, then nothing. We waited. We waited for a long time without speaking. The light from every room in the house continued its ordinary business. Rook eventually lay down between us on the living room floor. At 4 hours after midnight, the quality of the night outside the windows changed in a way I cannot describe precisely except to say that it changed in the way that a room changes when the large thing that was in it leaves. The particular alteration in the air when a significant presence is no longer present. I went to the front door and opened it. The valley was empty and dark, and the northern tree line was the northern tree line, silent and ordinary, no shape at its edge. I went back inside and locked the door. I called Bill in the morning. I said we did not look at its face. He was quiet for a moment. He said, "That is the hardest rule." I said, "Yes." He said, "I know." Part 4, Fall Chapter 8. What Bill's document said about fall between summer and fall, there were 3 months of the valley being the valley, of ordinary mountain life in the summer and early fall, of the work that a property of 63 acres generates, and that I had taken up with the full commitment of a person who needed the physical engagement of real work and who had found it here. I was fencing the upper pasture and clearing the creek bed of the debris that had accumulated in the spring thaw, and learning to operate the tractor that had come with the property, and that had views on self-expression that differed significantly from mine. Claire was establishing the garden, which was ambitious, and learning from Darla about the specific conditions of growing things at this elevation, and was writing, which was the work she had brought from the city, and that she found the valley suited better than the city had. She wrote at the kitchen table in the mornings with the valley visible through the east window, and she told me once that the quality of light in that window at 7 in the morning was worth the drive from our old life on its own. We were happy. I want to say this clearly because it is true, and because the happiness matters to the story. We were happy in the valley in a way that we had not been happy anywhere else, and the spring and summer visits, whatever else they were, had not diminished the happiness. They had, in some way I found difficult to articulate, added a dimension to it. The valley was real. The valley was more real than anything we had lived with before. It contained things that demanded your full attention, and it gave you, in exchange for that attention, the experience of being fully present in your own life. Then fall came, and I read the section of Bill's document on the fall visit. The document said in fall it comes as a sound, no figure, no light, a sound, coming from inside the house. The document said, at sunset on the fall equinox you will hear it in a room you are not in, a sound that is difficult to describe with accuracy. The best description we have managed over the years is the sound of something very old settling its weight, like very large bones, like a structure under load, but the structure is not your house. The document said, the sound will move through the house. It will be in a different room every 15 to 20 minutes. It will not be in the room you are in. As long as you stay in one room together, The sound will visit every other room but not yours. The document said the rules for fall are these. Stay in one room. Stay together. Do not go to investigate the sound. Do not open any interior door to look into any other room. The sound will stop on its own. It always stops. It has stopped every fall equinox we have experienced at a point somewhere in the early morning hours. We cannot explain why it stops, but it does. The document said, on one occasion we separated. Darla needed the bathroom. The bathroom is 2 doors from the bedroom we had chosen to stay in. She was gone for approximately 2 minutes. During those 2 minutes, the sound was in the bathroom. She remained in the bathroom until the sound moved. She came back to the bedroom. We do not speak about the 2 minutes in which she was alone with the sound in the bathroom. We include this incident only to tell you do not separate. I read this to Claire. She said, do not separate. I said, agreed. She said, we use one of those portable toilet buckets for camping if necessary. I said I was going to suggest the same thing. She said, Bill and Darla do not speak about the bathroom. I said, no. She said, whatever is in the bathroom is not something Bill writes 22 pages and leaves the bathroom out of. I said, that is my reading of it too. Chapter 9. The fall equinox we chose the bedroom. It had 1 door which we locked. We had the camping bucket. We had food and water for the night because the document said the sound did not stop until early morning and we were not going to the kitchen for anything. We had books and cards and things to keep our hands and minds occupied. Because I had learned from spring and summer that occupying your hands and mind is not a retreat from the experience but a management of it, a way of staying functional while the thing outside or inside or around you does what it does. Rook was with us. Rook had been with us for both previous visits, and I had no intention of changing this. Whatever information he was receiving that we could not receive, having him with us felt like having an additional instrument, and an additional instrument was worth having. The sound began at sunset. It was in the kitchen first, which was directly below the bedroom, and I felt it through the floor before I heard it properly. A vibration at a frequency lower than I could hear clearly, but that my body registered as sound. Then it resolved into the sound itself, which the document had described as accurately as the document could describe anything. Something very old settling its weight. Large and slow and patient, with the quality of something that has been in this position before, and will be again, and that the current iteration of the settling is entirely routine. It moved from the kitchen to the living room. We heard it in the living room for 17 minutes. Then it moved to the study. Then the rear utility room. Then it came upstairs. This was the part the document did not fully prepare you for. The document said the sound would not be in the room you were in. The document did not say how close it would come to the room you were in before moving away. It came to the door of the bedroom. It stopped at the door. The sound at the door was not at the level of the floor or the ceiling. It was at the level of the door handle. It was the sound of something settled at the level of a door handle, patient and old and very close to the 2 inches of wood between it and where we were. Rook stood and faced the door. He did not bark. He did not whine. He stood and faced it with the absolute focus of a dog that has positioned itself between its people and the thing at the door. And he was very still, and the stillness of him was the most grounding thing in the room. I looked at Claire. She was looking at me. Her hand was in mine, which she had put there when the sound came upstairs and had not moved. The sound at the door lasted 9 minutes. I know this because I was counting. 9 minutes of something at the door of the room where my wife and my dog and I were sitting on the bed with the lights on and the door locked. Then the sound moved. It went to the guest room across the hall, then to the upstairs bathroom. then back down the stairs, and through the house in the order it had not yet visited, methodical in a way that suggested the visiting of rooms was not random, but that every room was on a list, and every room was going to be checked. At 2 in the morning it stopped, not slowly, not in the way that a sound diminishes when the thing making it moves away. Between one moment and the next, the sound was not there. The house was the house, quiet in the mountain dark, the creak audible through the bedroom window in the way it was always audible. We waited another hour before we unlocked the bedroom door. We did this not because the document required it, but because an hour felt like the right buffer between the sound stopping and us being willing to test the stopping. The house was empty. Every room was the room it had always been. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing was moved. I stood in the kitchen and made coffee while Claire sat at the table, and we did not say much for a while, which was also the right choice. Eventually, Claire said, "Do you think it found what it was looking for?" I said, "I do not know what it is looking for." She said, "Maybe it is not looking for anything. Maybe it is just making sure everything is still here." I thought about this. I said, "Making sure we are still here." She said, "Yes." We sat with that. Part 5, Winter Chapter 10. What Bill's document said about winter. The winter section of Bill's document was the shortest. I had come to understand over the year of reading and rereading the document, Bill's way of communicating that the winter visit was the most serious. Bill communicated the most serious things with the fewest words. The longer the section, the more there was to explain. The shorter the section, the more direct the thing being communicated. The winter section was 3 pages. The document said, "In winter, it comes as weather." The document said, "On the winter solstice, the weather in this valley does not follow the weather elsewhere. The weather elsewhere that night may be clear or may be storm. The weather in this valley on the solstice is determined by something other than meteorology. We have experienced the winter visit in clear conditions and in blizzard conditions, and in every variety of Idaho mountain winter weather. The weather you experience is not random. We do not know what determines it. We know that whatever weather arrives on the solstice arrives with it." The document said, "The rules for winter are the simplest and the most absolute. You do not go outside. From sunset on the solstice until sunrise the following morning, you do not go outside under any circumstance. Not for any animal, not for any emergency that is addressable inside the house, not for any reason that you can think of. We have been in this valley through 31 winters, and we have not gone outside on the solstice since the first year. We do not go outside." The document said, "We will tell you what we know about what happens if you go outside on the winter solstice, which is not everything, because we do not know everything. We know that 2 families who previously occupied the Harlan place went outside on the solstice. Both of these families subsequently abandoned the property. The property was vacant for several years between each family and the next, which is part of why it was undervalued when you purchased it. We do not know specifically what those families experienced. We know that they left and did not return, and that the people we have spoken with who knew members of those families described them as permanently changed by whatever they experienced. The document said, "Do not go outside." This is the whole of the winter rule. Whatever you hear, whatever you see from the windows, whatever appears to be happening outside, do not go outside. I read this to Claire. She read it back to herself. She said, "Do not go outside." I said, "Yes." She said, "No exceptions." I said, "That is what the document says." She looked at me. She said, "What do you think it does in winter?" I said, "I do not know." She said, "Bill does not know." I said, "Bill says he does not know, and I believe him. He is careful about the difference between what he knows and what he suspects." She said, "But he suspects." I said, I think so. She said, what do you think he suspects? I thought about the 3 pages and the economy of Bill's communication. I said, I think he suspects that in winter it is not watching or testing or checking. I think he suspects that in winter it is something else, something with a different relationship to whatever it wants from us, something that requires our being outside to complete. Claire was quiet. She said, and if we are not outside? I said, then it cannot complete it. She said, and it goes. I said, and it goes. She said, then we do not go outside. I said, then we do not go outside. Chapter 11. The winter solstice. The solstice was a clear night, which I had not expected. The week leading up to it had been building toward the kind of storm that Idaho mountain winters produce, with the casual destructive power of a region that does not treat weather as exceptional. And I had spent the week making sure we had everything we could need for an extended indoor period. Firewood inside, water stored, food stocked, all outdoor tasks completed, and all outdoor tasks that had not been completed accepted as tasks that would wait until the morning after the solstice. The storm did not arrive. The afternoon of the solstice was still and cold, and the sky went clear as the sun went down, the kind of cold clear that amplifies starlight, the kind of night sky that the mountain west produces when it wants to remind you of its scale. We were inside 2 hours before sunset, every door locked, every light on. Rook inside and settled, which he had done more smoothly than the previous 2 visits, as though he too was learning the rhythm of the year. The night began. For the first 3 hours it was quiet. The valley was the valley under starlight, and the creek was audible in the way of a creek in winter, slower and quieter than its summer self, and nothing moved on the valley floor or on the slopes that I could see from the windows. Then Rook went to the front door. He did not bark. He pressed his nose to the gap at the base of the door, and he breathed the air from outside, and he turned and looked at me, and the expression on his face was one I had not seen from him in a year of watching his expressions carefully. It was not the focused alertness of the previous visits. It was something more fundamental, something that was closer to the base of the animal, the thing beneath the training and the breed and the personality, the oldest layer. I went to him. I crouched beside him and put my hand on his back. The air coming under the door was cold, as mountain air in December is cold, and it smelled of pine and of snow that had not yet fallen, and of something else. Something that I do not have a word for, and that I will not try to construct a word for, because the construction would be inadequate. Something that the air in this valley did not smell like on any other night of the year. Something that belonged to this night specifically. I stood up. I said to Claire, do not go to any window that faces outside. She looked at me. I said, I am going to look. You should not. She said, Owen. I said, I need to look. I need to understand. After this year, I need to understand what is in this valley, and looking through a window is not going outside. She looked at me for a long moment. She said, come back from the window. I said, I will. I went to the window on the south side of the house, which was the window with the widest view of the valley and the eastern slope. I stood to the side of it and I looked out. Chapter 12. What I saw, I am going to tell you what I saw. I am going to tell you precisely and without embellishment, and I am going to tell you what I understand it to mean and what I do not understand. The valley was lit by stars. The sky was entirely clear, and the stars at this elevation and this latitude on a cloudless December night are not decorative. They are structural. They provide light in quantities that the urban sky never provides, and that change the character of darkness from impenetrable to merely deep. In this light, the valley was visible from the house all the way to the eastern slope, and all the way to the northern and southern ends of the visible valley floor. The valley was full. Not full in the way of a crowd. Full in the way of a field that has something in every part of it, present everywhere simultaneously, not gathered in any one place but distributed across the entire space. I cannot tell you what I saw, because what I saw did not resolve into a shape I have a name for. What I can tell you is that the valley was occupied in a way that it was not occupied on any other night of the year. Occupied by something that was in the grass and the soil and the air above both. Something that was the valley in the way that water is not a container, but a substance. The valley was not visited by it on the winter solstice. On the winter solstice, it revealed what it was. It was not something that came to the valley on this night. It was something that the valley was, and on this night it stopped being what it was in secret and simply was what it was. I understood, looking out the window on the south side of my house on the winter solstice, why the two families who had gone outside had not come back to themselves. Not because going outside was physically dangerous in any straightforward way, although perhaps it was. Because going outside was going into it. Going outside on the winter solstice was submerging yourself in what the valley was, completely and without the membrane of a door and walls between you and the submersion. And the submersion was something that a person who came back from it would not come back from unchanged. Something that had been in this place since before the place had a name. Something that was the place itself. I stepped away from the window. Claire was behind me. She had not gone to another window. She had waited. I said, "Do not go to the window." She said, "Okay." I said, "Not tonight." She said, "What did you see?" I looked at her. I thought about how to say it. I said, "The valley is not haunted." A haunting is something that is in a place. What we have is different. The valley is alive. It has always been alive. The seasons are its seasons. The visits are its seasons. Spring is when it watches. Summer is when it tests. Fall is when it checks. Winter is when it simply exists and shows you what it is. She looked at me. She said, "And what is it?" I said, "Old. Very old." Older than old in the way we usually mean the word. Old in the way of something that has been here since before there was a word for here. She said, "Is it dangerous?" I said, "It is what it is." Dangerous is a category for things that want to harm you. I do not think it wants to harm us. I think we are a recent addition to what it has been for a very long time, and the visits are at determining what we are and what our place in it is, the way any old thing assesses something new in its territory. She was quiet. She said, "Do you think we passed?" I said, "We followed the rules. We stayed inside. We did not go to it." She said, "But do you think we passed?" I thought about the feel of the year, the spring equinox and the watching, the summer solstice and the testing, the fall equinox and the checking, the winter solstice and the revealing. I said, "I think the year was an assessment. I think it was looking at us the way you look at something you have not seen before, to understand what it is. I think what it found was two people who followed the rules, which are not arbitrary rules, but the rules that govern the relationship between people and the land in this valley, and who did not run and did not fight and did not go to it when it revealed itself." I said, "I think that counts for something." At sunrise, the quality of the valley changed, not dramatically, not with any visible event. The starlight faded into the gray pink of mountain dawn, and the valley was the valley in the pale morning, and the grass was the grass, and the creek was the creek, and the eastern slope was the eastern slope. The ordinary, specific, beloved landscape of the place we had chosen. I unlocked the front door. I opened it. The air was cold and clean and smelled of pine and of a December morning in Idaho. Rook went out into the valley and ran. Part 6, the second year, Chapter 13. What changed the second year was different from the first in a specific and significant way that I want to describe accurately. The visits were the same. Spring, summer, fall, winter. The same forms, the same rules, the same durations. We followed the rules with the same care we had followed them the first year, and the visits passed the way they passed, and we came through each of them intact, and with the relationship to the valley that we had been building since the day we drove in with Rook and our furniture. What changed was not the visits. What changed was the valley between the visits. I have been trying to describe this to Bill, who listens with the patience of someone who has been in this valley for 31 years, and who understands that the people who come after him will understand things he did not understand in his first year, and that some of those things are worth understanding together. The valley in the second year felt different to me in the way that a relationship with a person feels different in the second year than in the first. Not better or worse in any simple sense. Deeper, more complete, more legible. In the first year, I had been learning the valley, its topography, its microclimates, its water behavior, the particular way its different sections responded to weather and season. This was the ordinary knowledge of a person getting to know a place. In the second year, I had that knowledge, and beneath it, I had something else. Something I do not have a fully accurate word for, but that comes closest to being called recognition. The valley recognized us. We recognized it back. The grass in the morning was the grass in the morning. The creek was the creek. The eastern slope in evening light was the eastern slope in evening light. All of these were the same as the first year, and all of them were different in the way that anything is different when what you are seeing it through has changed. In the first year, I looked at the valley and saw what was in front of me. In the second year, I looked at the valley and saw what was in front of me, and something underneath what was in front of me. The something that was the valley before the grass and the creek and the slopes. The something that the visits had shown me was there. The old patience of the land. It was not frightening. I want to be clear about this because the sequence of events I have described involves a great deal of fear, or something adjacent to fear, and I do not want the account to end on that note because that note is not accurate to where we are now. The presence in this valley is not frightening. It is old, and it is large, and it is entirely outside the categories of anything I was taught to understand. And the visits are among the most genuinely unsettling experiences I have had. And I do not recommend going outside on the winter solstice. But the valley itself, the land itself, the thing that is the valley when it simply is what it is without the revelations and the tests and the watches, is not frightening. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever lived inside. Chapter 14. The Bill and Darla conversation. I had dinner with Bill and Darla at their property in the spring of the second year, which was the week after the second spring equinox. And after dinner, Bill and I walked out to the fence line at the edge of his property and stood there in the evening and looked at the valley. He asked me how the second spring had been. I said, easier. Not easier in the sense that what the light does is easier. Easier in the sense that I knew what it was and what it was looking for, and there was no uncertainty in the not going outside. He said, that is the second year, yes. I said, Bill, how long have you known about the valley? He said, 31 years. I said, the first years were hard. He said, the first years were very hard. We came close to leaving several times. After the summer in the first year, when I looked at its face, we came close to leaving. After the fall in the third year, when Darla was in the bathroom, we came close to leaving. I said, what kept you? He looked at the valley. He looked at it with the eyes of a man who has been looking at it for 31 years. He said, you cannot leave this valley. Once you have lived inside it, once you have been through the year with it and come out the other side, you cannot leave. Not because it will not let you, because you would not be the same person in another place. You would be a person who had been in this valley and was no longer in it, and that person is smaller than the one who stayed. He looked at me. He said, "Does that make sense?" I thought about the morning after the winter solstice. Rook in the valley grass. The eastern slope in the early light. Claire beside me in the doorway. I said yes. He said, "We have written a new section for the document, based on what we have learned in the past 3 years. We want to give it to you." I said, "What does it say?" He said, "It says that the year we have been describing is not the complete picture. The visits are the visible structure of something larger. The larger thing is not the visits. The larger thing is the accumulation of the years. Every year you are here. Every year you follow the rules and pass the tests and stay inside and do not go outside. The relationship changes. It deepens." He said, "After 31 years, Darla and I can tell you that the valley knows us. I do not know what knowing means to something this old, but the knowing is real. And it is the best thing I have ever had. Better than the house. Better than the land. The knowing." He turned and walked back toward the house. I stayed at the fence for a moment and looked at the valley in the evening light, the 63 acres of mixed mountain terrain that was mine and Claire's now, the creek running in the east and the slopes rising on both sides, the grass going gold in the particular golden light of an Idaho evening in May. The valley looked back. I had been in enough places in my life to know that most places do not do this, do not have the quality of returning attention, do not produce the specific experience of mutual awareness between a person and the land they are standing on. This one did. I said, to the valley, and to whatever the valley was, and to whatever the valley had been since before there was a name for it, "Good evening." I walked back to the house. Chapter 15. What I would tell someone. I am writing this because Bill told me he was considering passing the document on to the family that had just bought the property 2 valleys over. A young couple who had moved in from the city with a dog and plans for the kind of life that the Mountain West offers people who are willing to do the work it requires. He said they seemed like good people. I said that was probably the most important qualification. He said he was thinking of writing them a letter. He asked if I wanted to add anything to what the document contained. I thought about this for a while, and then I wrote what I am going to set down here as the last section of this account. What I would tell someone who is about to learn what we learned. The rules are not arbitrary. Every rule in the document has a reason behind it, and the reason is the specific nature of what each visit is and what it needs from you. Understanding the reason helps you follow the rule. The spring light needs to watch without being approached, because being approached changes the watch into something else. The summer figure needs to assess without being looked at directly, because looking at its face is looking at something you will not unsee. The fall sound needs to move through the house without encountering you, because encountering you changes what it does. The winter valley needs to be what it is without you going into it, because going into it is a kind of consent that changes what you are. The rules are about not changing the thing unnecessarily. Let it be what it is. Do not go to it. Do not confront it. Do not try to change the terms of the relationship. Let the relationship be what it needs to be through the year, and the year will be what it needs to be, and you will come through it, and the valley will know you a little better, and you will know the valley a little better. What I would also tell someone, the fear is real and the fear is appropriate, and the fear does not diminish with the years, but it changes. It becomes a fear that is part of the relationship rather than a fear that is in opposition to it. You are afraid at the spring equinox because what is watching you is something that deserves to be afraid of. The fear confirms the reality of it. The fear is a kind of respect. Let it be that. And finally, the valley will ask things of you that seem unreasonable and that are, in fact, entirely reasonable if you understand what is asking and why. It will ask you to stay inside when every instinct says to go out. It will ask you to not look at a face that is at your window in the night. It will ask you to stay still in a room while a sound that is not a human sound moves through every other room in your house. It will ask you to observe the winter's revelation through glass, rather than going into it directly. These things will be hard. They will be among the hardest things you do. And you will do them, and you will come through them, and the valley will be yours, and you will be the valleys, and no other place will ever be as fully real to you as this one. That is what I would tell someone. That is, in the end, what Bill told us in 2200 pages. He was right about all of it. Chapter 16. This evening I am sitting on the porch of our house on the Harlan Place on an evening in early summer of our 3rd year here. The valley is in its evening gold, the specific angle of light that I have learned to wait for in the late afternoon, the light that comes over the western slope at an angle that catches the grass and the creek and the slopes in a way that makes the valley look like something that was made to be looked at. Claire is at the kitchen table writing. Rook is in the valley grass, which is where Rook is whenever the valley grass is available to be in. The creek is audible from the porch in the summer evening way, fuller and faster than fall or winter, carrying the meltwater from the high slopes. The summer solstice is in 3 weeks. I know what will come with it. I know where it will appear and how it will move and how long it will stay and what I will need to do and what I will need to not do. I know that I will not look at its face, because not looking at its face is the rule, and the rule has a reason, and the reason is real. I know that I am afraid, in the low-level and appropriate way that I am always afraid in the 3 weeks before a solstice or an equinox, the way that confirms the reality of the thing and the seriousness of the relationship. I know that I will come through it. I know this because we have come through 3 other visits in 2 years, and because Bill Prout has come through 31 years of visits, and because the land has been in this valley longer than either of us, and it has not broken anything that followed the rules. I look at the valley in the evening gold, and the valley looks back. This is not a metaphor. This is not the pathetic fallacy, the projection of human characteristics onto an inhuman thing for the comfort of the projection. The valley looks back. I know this. I have known it since the 2nd year when the recognition that Bill described became available to me. The old patience of the land. I said, "Good evening." The valley was the valley. It was enough.